I've been running the kitchen at Kethara Ridge for 12 years, which means I've also been running the supply log, the welfare register, the maintenance record, and every other piece of paper the Colonial Compact requires a station keeper to maintain. Nobody checks. The militia units pass through in spring, stamp something, and go back down. The resettlement coordinators route their convoys through the lower corridor where the road is better. For 12 years, the only thing that came to my door unannounced was weather. At 03:10 on the 9th day of the third storm cycle, the perimeter sensor tripped. I pulled my coat on and went out with a lamp. The wind was running hard off the upper face, the kind that takes your voice before it leaves your mouth. I found her at the second fence post, face down in the drift, one hand still hooked into the wire. Small, lavender skin, the color of something that grew in low-light conditions and knew how to be still. White hair frozen at the tips. She was wearing a thermal sheet wrapped 4 times around her torso and tied with cargo string, and tucked inside the wrapping was a strip of transit fabric with an address pressed into it. Soreth Resettlement Corridor, Receiving Contact, Orenvel, cut so hard the letters had gone through 2 layers of cloth. I picked her up. She weighed less than a full-grain sack. I carried her inside. I put her on the cot nearest the stove and checked her over for damage, the way you check anything that has been out in Kethara in a third-cycle storm, methodically, without rushing. She was breathing. Her skin was cold, but not the deep cold that means the core has given up. When I put a warm cloth on her hands, she flinched, which was a good sign. I filed the Biological Welfare Discovery at 0341, Compact Frontier Survival Code, Subclause 14, Paragraph 3, cross-reference to Corridor Health and Safety Accord Article 14. Living non-Terran biological entity found in distress at a registered compact relief station. Protective custody initiated. 72-hour welfare hold commencing at time of filing. The corridor relay acknowledged at 0344. I noted the timestamp in the station log and went back to the stove. She woke up around 0600. She didn't make a sound, just opened her eyes, soft emerald, the kind of color that shouldn't exist at altitude, and watched me move around the kitchen. I put a bowl of grain porridge on the cot beside her. She looked at it for a long time. I had a wooden serving spoon on the counter. Old thing, carved from a piece of Vethran hardwood I'd picked up 8 years ago, worn smooth from a decade of use. I set it next to the bowl. She picked up the spoon first. She held it in both hands and turned it over twice. Then she ate. We had 2 days before the militia arrived. She was wary for about 4 hours after waking, until she decided the spoon was hers, and I wasn't going to argue about it. After that, she followed me around the station the way a cat follows someone it has decided is acceptable, close enough to observe, far enough to bolt. She didn't speak any language I knew. She had her own sounds, soft consonants and long vowel shapes. I talked to her anyway, because silence at altitude gets heavy, and because she seemed to like a voice that wasn't threatening her. On the second day, she helped me stack the supply crates. She was methodical about it, precise, the way a child is precise when they have been taught that things matter, and doing them correctly is how you show you understand that. When we finished, she made a sound I hadn't heard before, low and even, 3 notes, and put her hand briefly on my arm. I think it was thank you. Unit 12 came up the pass at 11:40 on the 3rd day. 6 soldiers, frontier militia insignia, 2 transport sleds. The unit commander was a man named Dross, compact and efficient, with the manner of someone who has been authorized to do something and intends to do it cleanly. He told me they were running a bio-registration sweep under Colonial Settlement Directive 14, authorizing the removal of any unregistered non-Terran biological material from frontier stations, pending corridor census documentation. I told him I had a registered biological welfare hold in effect, filed at 0341 2 days prior, acknowledged by the corridor relay at 0344, logged in the station biological register on page 47. I invited him inside for tea. He came in. He saw the child across the room, standing by the supply shelf with the wooden spoon in her hands. His 2 lead soldiers came in behind him. Dross told me that Directive 14 superseded welfare holds in cases of unregistered biological material. I told him that Compact Frontier Survival Code Subclause 14, Paragraph 3, predated Directive 14 by 11 years and had never been formally amended, and that under the compact's own precedent, register the older instrument held in cases of direct conflict at frontier relief stations specifically, which was a distinction Directive 14's drafters had apparently not considered necessary to close. He asked if I was a legal officer. I told him I was a cook, that at Cathara Ridge in a blizzard there is nothing to do in the evenings except read, and I had been reading the same shelf of compact law for 12 years and had gotten thorough. He tried 3 more approaches over the next 2 hours. He invoked Corridor Census Emergency Authority. I countered with Article 9 of the Compact Resettlement Protocol, which exempts active welfare holds from Census Authority interference at registered relief stations. He argued my filing was incomplete. I walked him to the station log, showed him the filing, the acknowledgement, the timestamp, and asked which field he believed was missing. He couldn't name one. He suggested I was obstructing a lawful militia operation. I told him, as calmly as I knew how, that he was welcome to wait out the 72-hour hold period, at which point a resettlement coordinator would arrive to transfer the child into the corridor network, and that until that window expired, neither of us had authority to terminate it under any instrument he had cited. His jaw was tight. His hands were still in the way. That means someone is working through a problem and not finding a solution. The child stood at the supply shelf and held the spoon and watched with those soft emerald eyes, steady, the way she watched everything. I offered tea again. Dross declined. He told me he'd be filing an obstruction report. I told him I'd attach my welfare hold documentation to any formal inquiry as a matter of course. Unit 12 went back down the pass at 1420. Orenvel arrived at hour 71, climbing up from the lower corridor with a resettlement pack on her back and snow on her boots. She was a Sorath woman, tall, with the tired efficiency of someone who has been doing difficult logistics work for a long time. She confirmed the address on the transit fabric against her own records and nodded once, the way you nod when something has gone right for a change. The child didn't know what was happening at first. She stood at the kitchen threshold and watched me talk to Oren. I crouched down, my knees don't love it, and put myself at her level, and told her that Oren was going to take her somewhere warm, somewhere with other people who knew her sounds, somewhere the address on the cloth had been pointing to all along. She looked at me for a long moment, then she held out the spoon. I shook my head. I folded her hands around it and kept mine over hers for a moment. She made the 3-note sound again. Low and even, 3 notes, the same as the first time. Then she went with Oren. I stood in the doorway and watched them go down the pass until the snowfall took them. Oren had her hand on the child's shoulder, steady and sure, and the child walked beside her without looking back. The third cycle storms don't wait. I went inside. I updated the station log. Welfare hold concluded. Subject transferred to resettlement network at hour 71, per Corridor Health and Safety Accord Article 14. All documentation filed. All instruments satisfied. I noted Dross's visit, the directives he cited, my responses, and the outcome. I sent copies to the corridor relay. Then I went back to the stove. There was nothing on the counter where the wooden spoon usually sat. I noticed it the way you notice any absence. Not suddenly, just gradually, the familiar shape no longer there. 12 years at Cathara Ridge. I had read everything on that shelf, and learned, among other things, exactly where every legal instrument had a seam. It turned out that mattered. I put the kettle on and kept working.